Church lobbies. We all know they could be awkward. They could feel dead, like there's not any energy. What do we do about them? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Because today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to give you 5 ways to make your church lobby less awkward.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Josian. Joining me is Dylan Dodson. And today we're talking about 5 ways to make your church lobby, everyone's church lobby is so awkward, to make it less awkward.
Let's make it less awkward.
Let's try.
Because sometimes you could walk in, it could be lonely, it could feel awkward. Basically, if you follow Practical Church Planting, we talk about this a lot, create more energy and excitement because that affects the whole Sunday experience.
Yeah.
And so here are some tips on how you can make your church lobby less awkward. Number 1, and this actually, starting best for first, this might be the biggest one. Here's a big thing that I have noticed that I think we don't always give enough attention to. Number 1 is to make it smaller.
But we can't move the walls.
Here's the deal. Sometimes you walk into spaces that are just, part of the reason why it's awkward is because it's so big. And especially if it's a church plant or a smaller church, there's just something that feels weird about having a ginormous space with not a lot of people, where you could have the same amount of people in a smaller space and it feels great.
Right.
It's like, why you could have 50 people in an auditorium, and if the auditorium is smaller like ours, there's no problem to have just 50.
Yeah.
If you're in a 500-seat auditorium,
that
feels terrible.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's way too big. And so you want to have a smaller auditorium or a smaller lobby. And so if you're in a place that is like you said, what if you can't move the walls? A couple years ago, before we launched New City, I was part of a church for a while that was portable, and they met in a high school. Mm-hmm. But the lobby area in front of their auditorium was massive. And so it was so awkward. It was quiet. It was dead. There was no energy. And what should have happened was there should have been pipe and drape that were put to cut the lobby like 70% of it away. And so if you're in a space that you can't control as much, use pipe and drape. Mm-hmm. Do something to make it not so big so that people are kind of more forced closer together, where they'll actually talk to each other, where it doesn't feel quiet, where it doesn't feel dead. But having a big lobby that doesn't have a lot of people in it relative to the size is an easy way to make it feel super awkward when you walk in the doors.
Yeah, you know what churches I've seen do this real well?
Hey, Brian, what churches have you seen do this real well?
I'm glad you asked, because I have an answer for that. And I'm sure not everyone does, but the 2 I've been to that meet in movie theaters, I've seen do this real well, because they are, well, first off, they have to section themselves off from the rest of the theater, because the rest of the theater is still open. But the times I've seen that, they have floor-to-ceiling pipe and drape, and they just completely made it the shape that they want to make it. They could bring it out or in if it was more full, and it completely separates you from the rest of the place, which is a different story, but what was really great. But it was the size that they wanted it to be. So if it's a lower, not if it's lower Sunday, but if they are a church that's not growing like they thought they would, they could shrink it down, and it didn't feel like it's this big room that they just threw a curtain in the middle of. Right. Like, they actually did it real well the times that I've seen it done. So it can be done well. You don't think that this is just something where you're throwing something up that's kind of like a Band-Aid that's ugly and everyone's going to hate it. It's just to make it smaller. But yeah, I mean, I think we've all been in scenarios where we walk into a lobby and it's just this like open space and there's no one really near me to talk to. And it's just like, you can almost hear like crickets. It's just awkward.
It feels awkward.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one way to make it less awkward, is to make it smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of churches, I think this is an easier fix than most people realize, and most people just don't do it. Yeah. And that's one really practical way to make it less awkward, is just to make it smaller.
Yeah, and I also think this is something that you may not realize is going to be an issue until it is. Because I think when looking for a space, if you see a place with a big lobby, you're like, well, we're going to be 500 people, so this is going to be great. But then when you get in there and there's not as many, it's like, oh, this is not something I expected to come across.
And you know this too, especially if you've planted recently. Maybe you met in your house or your apartment first and it felt fine. And you went to a bigger space and it felt a little awkward because it was so big. Yeah. Now, of course, you need to be able to grow into it. And we're talking just about the lobby, but just make it smaller. I guarantee you might see some surprisingly quick results in terms of the engagement and the excitement level.
For sure.
So number 1, make it smaller. Number 2, create spaces where people can naturally congregate. Mm-hmm. So let's say you have a good size lobby, but it still feels kind of awkward. What do? Well, if you create, like we have, we actually just changed around our space again, which is why if you watch the video version of this, we have moved yet again our little recording thing around. Or we have these I don't know, are they cocktail tables? I don't know what you call them. Kind of tall tables with what are we sitting on right now?
Stools. You may have heard of them.
Yeah, stools. Or if you don't have stools, like a place where people can put their drinks. Yeah. Or a place around something, maybe some seats, a couch somewhere. Create natural places for people to stand together. That way they have somewhere to go when they enter. And so if they're standing somewhere that's natural to go to, someone else walks in, there's not a million square footage and they're going to go to the same place as well.
Yeah.
So create spaces where people can naturally congregate, creates more energy because people are actually talking.
There's nothing more awkward than if you're in a place where you don't know a lot of people and maybe you're waiting for somebody that you're meeting there, or the person that you're with went to the restroom or something, and you just have an open space that you just have to stand.
Yes.
And nobody wants to feel like a teenager leaning against the wall. And so to have a place that they can, even if no one has anything to set down, just being able to stand near a table or something just makes it feel so much more comfortable.
Yep.
So just anything that makes it feel like there's things there that's not just an open space.
Right. And so again, I would look in your lobby. Do we have tables? Do we have somewhere to sit? Do we have anything that people would naturally go to? And one way you can test this out is just like, if it's like during the week, or maybe you don't have it during the week, early in the morning, like when there's not a lot of people there, maybe people setting up or whatever, is there anywhere that they go?
Right.
And if there's not, why don't you like put a table here or try something, and you'll naturally see, even if there's only a few people, where are they congregating, and try to make multiple of those depending on the size of your space. Makes it less awkward because then people have somewhere to go. And then they get trained.
Yeah.
So as they come in, they're going to go to these spaces. They're going to see people instead of like this awkward, like, hey, even if it's your friend that you kind of know, maybe not super well, like they're standing against the wall, so you go stand against the wall. But if you're just used to like, this is where we stand in the lobby, people will be more engaged.
Yeah, for sure.
So number 2, create spaces where people can naturally congregate. Number 3, music. Please.
I think might be the biggest one.
We actually noticed it this weekend. We had some issues with our Wi-Fi and our sound. It was weird. But after our first service, the music didn't play for what you said, like 30 seconds,
something like that. Yeah.
You were out in the lobby because you were giving a tour, which we talked about previous episode, why we give tours for new guests, which is awesome. But there was no music, and you said it was like awful.
I'm employed here and I wouldn't even come back. It's just awkward because people are coming out, and a lot of times if people are coming directly from
the service
out, they may not have started a conversation yet, especially the first few that are coming out. And if they come out to just silence, it's so awkward. Right. It's so awkward.
And the same thing if you come into silence.
Yes, that's true too.
And so whether you have a space and you can hook up sound, or if not, like get a Bluetooth speaker, get something. Obviously, it doesn't need to be blaring, but there needs to be some background noise. This is why coffee shops have it. This is why restaurants have it. Like it's just awkward when there's dead silence in our culture today. So please play something.
Yeah, it makes it feel like everyone can hear conversation. Yeah. You're nervous to talk to people at room volume because it seems like you're shouting if the room's silent. So just a lull in the background, just something that makes people more relaxed. That goes a long way.
And this is the same thing for your auditorium or whatever. Like just have something going before and after the service.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that creates energy, and energy makes things less awkward.
Makes the world go round.
There you go. Music, please. Number 3. Number 4. And we have a previous episode. I'm not sure the number specifically on this, but we talk about more of the why and how we do it.
Yeah.
But number 4, don't open your auditorium doors too early. Now, of course, this does depend on space. Maybe the space you're in, it's all one. But if you can control it, keep your auditorium doors closed so that people have to congregate together.
Yeah.
So like for us, and again, it depends on the size of your space and everything like that, because our space is pretty tight, we keep our auditorium doors closed, and there's a sign that says it on, and we have someone that stands in front of it who's our auditorium greeter. But there's also a sign on the door so no one really messes with it that says opens
5 minutes.
Yeah, I can't even read it. I know it's 5 minutes. I can't remember the exact wording. But it stays closed 5 minutes until before the service, and then we open it. And what that does is, again, especially if you're a smaller church and there's not a lot of people there, we talked about this before, if you have people outside in the lobby and in the auditorium, it just feels dead.
Yep.
But if they have to be in a certain area, then there's going to be more momentum, and there's going to be conversation, so that when you actually open the doors to the auditorium, people are walking in, they're talking to each other. There's even more excitement and momentum to starting the service when you do it that way.
Yep.
But close your auditorium doors. Again, if you have a bigger space, then it may need to be 10 minutes. There are some Sundays where we go a little bit longer, or like Easter, it was just packed where we didn't close it because we just didn't need to, and we would have had no room in the lobby. But most places, for most church plants, that's not the problem. So keep your doors closed until 5 or 10 minutes, whatever works for you, so it creates more energy in the lobby and it doesn't feel as awkward.
Yeah, I feel like I remember before we started doing this, weeks where after the service was done, we would think like it just did not seem like a very energetic or really very full Sunday. And then we looked at the count, the numbers of people that were there, and it was like that did not feel like that many people were there. But the reason is because people are just spread all throughout, and we don't have a big space like we've mentioned. But even in a smaller space, there people can be with. I mean, people are going to be dropping off their kids, people getting coffee. Potentially in the auditorium, outside talking to people. There's so many different places people can be to where if you don't have a giant congregation, if you don't limit those numbers of places, people are going to just naturally be spread all out, and it's going to feel like there's no one there, even if there is.
Right. So again, don't open your auditorium doors too early so that your lobby is not that awkward.
Yeah.
And then lastly, number 5, have a lobby greeter. So a volunteer position or a serve team position, as we call it here at New City. We actually have somebody who serves in the lobby, so that if there's somebody new, and this is somebody who's bubbly and outgoing. So it can't be someone who just was like stands there.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't feel awkward, so that if you're new, someone will act like if you're new and you're standing by yourself, you may not want to talk to somebody, but at least there's that option. Well, they'll talk to you for a minute and kind of feel it out.
Yeah.
But actually having somebody who has to actually be in the lobby to help it not seem so awkward is actually really helpful.
Yeah, we've experienced this at a very large church that we visited before we found New City, where we went in, and between getting out of our car to sitting down, not a single person spoke a word to us. And they had a very big, I mean, it was a large church. They had a very big lobby. And so it was very easy to get kind of, not lost, but not really know where to go.
Right.
And so I remember my wife and I walking in and just kind of like looking around like, I don't really even know where to go. And also, it's this big open space, which is designed like that. It was a big building, but there's no one really anywhere near me. There's no one like saying anything, and I don't know where to go. So I'm just here with my wife. It's kind of like we're on a date. Like nobody's talking to us, and we didn't know who was working, so I don't know who to talk to. But I remember the service was great. Everything was great about it, but it just left this really weird taste in our mouth. Right. That we felt super uncomfortable just walking in.
And it feels even more uncomfortable in a smaller setting. So as bad as that was,
yeah.
And again, we can easily forget, oh, this is our church. We know where to go. Mm-hmm. People that are new have no idea.
Yep.
And if it's even the slightest confusing to them, it's going to leave a very bad taste in their mouth.
Yep.
So showing people, hey, here's the auditorium, here's the bathroom. I mean, when you walk in, there's like a sign right next to the auditorium that you could see from the front doors that says, this is the auditorium, this is the bathroom, and this is where you get coffee.
Yeah.
And people will still ask, even though it's 7 feet in front of them.
Right.
They're like, where's the bathroom?
Yeah.
And so having somebody that can just talk to them and welcome them makes it less awkward, because there's somebody that's trained to help anyone that looks confused, lost, or is by themselves.
Well, that's a good point. In our space, and obviously you've never been here, you don't know, but if you walk in, if you just keep walking in a straight line, you walk into the auditorium. Like it takes no turns. You just walk. But I've had lots of people just ask, like, where do I go next? Where's the auditorium? And it's just because people aren't trying to investigate. They're not like surveying the area. They're not really sure, and they'd rather ask somebody than to go on accidentally wander to the kids area or wander somewhere they're not supposed to be.
There's nothing more intimidating, than feeling like you went somewhere where you're not supposed to go.
Yeah, totally.
Especially if you're new and don't have church experience, you might think that everyone's out to get you, or you might be super scared.
Right.
And so having it there. So again, that are 5 ways to help make your church lobby, okay, I can't speak, church lobby less awkward. Maybe you can try some of them this weekend. Number 1, make it smaller. 2, create spaces where people naturally congregate. 3, play some music, please.
Yes.
4, don't open the auditorium doors too early. And 5, have someone or have multiple people serving as lobby greeters.
Yep.
So thanks for listening. If you have something you want us to talk about specifically in a new episode, practicalplanting.com, which, by the way, is where you can go to watch everything if you want.
That's right. All your needs.
Practicalplanting.com/questions is where you can submit questions. And thanks for listening today. We'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.